feeling stuck, trapped by barriers holding you back from reaching your full potential? Well, let's bust through those barriers so that you can live your best life. Hi, I'm Matt Brooks, founder of Matt Brooks Coaching, and I'm passionate about helping people overcome barriers to achieve success. Join me for insights, strategies, and inspiring stories as we explore practical tips and powerful tools to unlock your true potential. This is the Barrier Busting Podcast. Well, welcome back, everybody. I am so excited today because I've got a special guest. He's someone I've known for decades, and the last time I did a podcast, we did a couple shows together that were fascinating. So I know he's going to be fascinating today, and he's actually agreed to do two because we've got a lot to talk about. So he'll be on this week and next week. As you know, last week I was talking about performance anxiety, and I was talking about it from the perspective of how it can happen to anyone, not just people who actually get up on stage and perform. You know, it can happen if you got to make a presentation at a meeting. It can happen if you got to give a toast at a wedding, etc. And so we talked about that last week, and I gave some tips as to how to deal with it, discuss some treatment options if it's severe. But today, my special guest is from the world of opera. And he's here to shed light on how performance anxiety affects professional performers in the hopes that learning about how professionals handle it will enlighten us as to how we should handle performance anxiety in any situation. He's also a lifelong tennis player, a very serious tennis player. So we'll be talking from the perspective of performance anxiety in tennis as well. You know, we don't think of the professional performer as a person who struggles with performance anxiety, but it turns out that they do. A 2019 study in Frontiers of Psychology showed that 50 to 70% of professional musicians reported compromised performances due to anxiety. And other studies have shown, interestingly enough, that 20 to 34% of elite athletes experience performance anxiety as well. So how do they deal with that and get through it? We're going to talk to that today. My guest is Dr. Jean-Ron Lafond, or as those of us who know him well call him Ron. Dr. Lafond has both a master's and doctorate from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree from the famous Westminster Choir College. Having performed over 40 operatic roles as a baritone and given at least as many performances of oratorio solos, he has also presented over 400 recitals in his prestigious career. He's worked as a stage director and also is an experienced theater actor. Throughout his career as a performer, Dr. Lafond maintained a strong presence as a teacher and mentor. He's taught at the University of Florida, East Carolina University, the University of Delaware, and Westminster Choir College. Currently, Ron works as a freelance teacher, regularly presenting master classes and private study all over the world. And he's developed his own philosophy for teaching singers that incorporates principles from both vocal science and, are you ready for this, martial arts. Ron is fantastic. Ron, it is so great to see you. Welcome to my new show.
So glad to be here, Matt, to have a good chatting.
I know it's not, and he's coming to us from Spain, so Ron and I don't get a chance to talk often, so it's really great to see him. I want to start with a little something about you. You have been facing stressful situations since you were a kid, right? And as an opera singer and teacher, you've certainly been exposed to all sorts of performance anxiety. But I want to go back to your childhood a little bit because it created a scenario that you have had to struggle with and overcome your whole life that I think is really impressive, having known you. You were born and raised for the first 11 years of your life in Haiti and in Port-au-Prince. And you have told me it was a very almost idyllic period. It was a wonderful upbringing at the time in Haiti. But your family moves you from there. You were on a beach all the time, right? And your family moved you from that to New Jersey, to Newark, right? Was it Newark? At the
Newark first.
Newark first, then what?
And then eventually Elizabeth Orange.
Yeah, but Newark from Haiti. I mean, that's a huge cultural shift and a huge shock, I know. And I know that it had a profound effect on you. And due to the stress, or shall we say, we really can call it PTSD from this move.
Yes.
You developed a stutter, and yet you became an opera singer. I mean, when I first knew you, which was 30 some odd years ago, your stutter was very pronounced compared to now, but you became an opera singer and a theater actor and all that. I mean, that's amazing. Let's start here and discuss how you overcame the stuttering, or at least figured out how to work with it, so that the inevitable performance anxiety that would come from your worry of that would go away to allow you to be a professional performer. Talk about this, please.
Great question. In fact, it's because of this that I eventually became an opera singer. I never really thought of becoming an opera singer. It kind of was a fluid process because of my stuttering.
Really?
I
How
started to
so?
stutter. Yeah, I started to stutter pretty badly when I went to school in the States. That's where the extreme culture shock happened. The
Yeah.
first day in class, I got up. The teacher called on me, and as I used to do in my country, I stood up to speak, and all the students started to laugh at me. It was just wild.
Oh,
So that was a shock. I had a wonderful teacher, so she managed to get me through all of that. But from that day on, the stutter was pretty extreme.
okay.
And I remember specifically, I was in my room in Elizabeth, New Jersey, because we moved from Newark to Elizabeth pretty soon after we had moved to Newark. And I remember in my room, I was singing. We listened to music at home a lot. Nobody was a professional musician, but we listened to music. And I was singing along with, I can't remember what song. And it hit me that I don't stutter when I sing. And then I
Interesting.
was watching, yeah, then I was watching a program. I was watching Johnny Carson, and he had as a guest Mel Tillis, the country singer,
Uh-huh.
who also stuttered horribly.
Really?
But Mel Tillis said that he doesn't stutter when he sings. So that became for me a way of expressing myself vocally because I was scared to speak in class. I
Yeah.
did not raise my hand, and my teachers eventually said, "Listen, Ron stutters, so you guys have to be patient with him." So sometimes I had to read in class, and that was an absolute nightmare.
Oh, I'll bet.
But again, good, solid teachers were helpful, and that created an environment where my colleagues actually were very tolerant and very nice to me. No, I have to say, during this whole time, no one in my class ever teased me about my stuttering because of these
Really?
teachers.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great. That's
that
great.
helped tremendously
See,
because
the
it was a
power of
nightmare.
teachers. I'm married to a teacher. I think they do not
I'm
get
telling
enough
you, man.
respect. But
Yeah,
think about
seriously.
this. It's not her job to care about your stuttering, but she did, right?
She did. She did. And that made a big difference. So eventually, I was given a scholarship to a small private school in New Jersey. And when I arrived, I was playing soccer and they were going to the school play. It's a very small school. So everybody participated in everything: sports, theater, music, everybody did everything. So the drama teacher asked me if I would audition for the play that year. It was a play called 40 Carats as a movie from the 1960s. Uh, and I said I stuttered terribly, so there's no way I'm going to audition for a straight play. But they knew I sang and I had done musical theater at my previous school. And so they really encouraged me to do this. So I said, fine, I'll do the audition, but you'll see, I stuttered so badly, you will not want me to do it. I auditioned, and the teacher assigned me the lead
Oh my
in the
God.
show.
The lead.
Yeah, the lead. But in order to do the lead, I had to give up soccer. And I was the scorer for the soccer team. And I said, no, man, there's no way I'm going to give up soccer team. They
Okay.
depend on me, so I have to be there.
Okay.
He said, okay, we'll figure out something. I'll talk to the coach. Well, I ended up with the second lead, which had even more lines than the lead. Oh, and she said, don't worry, I will help you out. Well, long story short, she couldn't figure out how to help me out. We got about midway rehearsals. I was stuttering to out my lines. It was getting embarrassing. People were feeling sorry for me. Walked in my music teacher, who was a choir teacher, and she said, see me after your rehearsal. And I went and she said, I think I can help you out. We're going to practice all of your lines singing. So if I had to say, let's just say, if I had to say to be or not to be, that is a question. Instead of just saying it that way, she would say, to be or not to be, that is the question. So we figured out these wonderful musical lines.
Like with
Years
tone and
later,
pitch, you're talking about,
with
right?
tone and
Yeah.
pitch
Okay.
and legato, she would insist, breathe, make sure every line is legato. So it's to be or not to be, that is the question. We created a line.
Interesting. And for
At
those that
first,
don't know legato, I'm sure most people know, but legato is very smooth. Everything is
very
connected.
smooth. Yeah, because
Connected.
everything is connected. Right. So at the end of it, years later, I found out that singing and speaking operate on different parts of the brain. So if anybody has ever had a major stroke and lose their speech ability, there was a movie with Robert De Niro who had a stroke and couldn't speak. And what his name is, Seymour Hoffman, ended up being this uh, actor voice teacher who helped him find his voice through singing.
Wow.
So singing and speaking happen from different parts of the brain.
Interesting.
And so what I actually end up using to work out my stuttering was essentially accessing the singing part of my brain when I speak. And as we are doing this right now, I'm using this technique right this minute. It may not sound it because I've become very adept at it, but I'm practically singing to you right now.
Well,
If you listen,
it's interesting because, like I said, when I first met you, which is what, 30 years ago, maybe now,
yeah,
um, your stutter was very pronounced, and this was in
it was
you were
pronounced,
in
definitely.
graduate school at Michigan at the time, and the last several times we've had chats, I don't think you've stuttered at all. And we've had long chats because you and I don't
Yeah.
talk often, and when we do, we get going and seasons go by. It feels like when we talk to each other, and so you've really figured this out, and I don't know. I want to congratulate you. It's really inspirational. I know we talk a lot about overcoming challenges and barriers, and I, as a life coach, work with people on this. This is the main event, right? Overcoming barriers. You found a creative way to live with it and work with it, and I think that's the very basic idea about overcoming any challenge in your life. So kudos
Exactly.
to you, my friend. Kudos to you.
Thank you, man.
Can we shift to your work as a teacher now?
Sure.
You've worked with singers from all over the world and at all levels, including singers at the very highest echelons of the opera world. And you are also a very serious lifelong tennis player, as I've mentioned. You've also witnessed and studied the effects of performance anxiety in sports as well as in the performing arts. Let's talk about
Right.
what you've witnessed and learned about performance anxiety. First, how would you define performance anxiety, especially in the context of first opera singing, then we'll come back to tennis. So how do you define it in the context of opera singing?
It is, for me, essentially a state of mind um, that that you get into because of a history of things not happening the way you want them to happen. You have a feeling of you're not in control of what you're about to do, even though you've practiced. And so then you get to the moment when you have to do it, and there's a sense of dread. There's a sense that I'm not going to do well here. Um, it's not logical. You may have rehearsed the piece 100,000 times and it went well, but because of some times when it didn't, a history of things like that creates essentially a state of mind where you are convinced that you're not going to do that well.
Right, right.
That ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy because what you think essentially is what ultimately is going to happen, right?
I talked about this in my episode last week, and in terms of anxiety in general, most anxiety is caused from fear of anxiety. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean? It's not necessarily caused from actually some event. It's caused from fear of anxiety, and like you said, typically from something that happened way long ago. Like you being humiliated in front of your class the first day of school in Newark, but that didn't keep you from performing. Somehow you found a way to get over that.
Right. And, because I could have remembered that day as being terrified, but then I also remember that teacher who came to my rescue.
Yeah.
And that was a positive side of it, right? So there's always an out. You have to figure out what the out is because we're going to get nervous. Pavarotti said, if any singer tells you before a performance they're not nervous, nervous is normal. He said they're lying or they don't care.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, he actually said this. You can find that.
No, I believe you. I believe you.
Yeah.
So, I
he
mean,
used
and
to
I'm
go
sorry
on-
I interrupted your train of thought there, but I just really had to jump in on that point.
Yeah.
But they're lying. So so you're saying that basically this is nervousness. Have
Yes.
you seen it when it's more than nervousness, when it's more severe than
Oh,
that?
sure. Absolutely. Nervousness is normal. We all get used to, okay, I get the butterflies and I'm going to use the energy for my performance, or the energy can overwhelm you. And then that becomes panic. And then that becomes PTSD. That becomes essentially anxiety,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I have seen situations of really good singers. Actually, a very good friend of mine that I taught for a period of time was making his Met debut in Carmen,
His
and
debut at the
absolutely
Met. Is that what you're saying?
at the Met. Yeah,
Wow.
man, he had a wonderful career in Europe, especially, and because of that wonderful success, he was invited to the Met, and just had a horrific night. I was listening from Berlin at the time, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, uh, Berlin time, and I'm listening to him fall apart.
Oh my.
And this is a role that the guy had sung several times with great success, which is why the Met invited him to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the Met doesn't invite anybody to do anything unless they're secure that, that you're going to kick ass. Well, I could hear piece by piece him falling apart and was just a wreck of a performance.
Did they fire him after that, or did he get another shot? I mean, how did that work?
He
How
had
does
a
that
great
work?
manager. So originally he had 7 performances of this role, and the Met wanted to let him go, but his management, which is pretty powerful, made them give him 2 performances instead of 7. So he ended up doing one more performance. I don't know how that went, but those things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a bad night, but in this case, it sounds like
He had
it
a
was
terrible night,
from
and
anxiety, right?
it was because he had had a series of performances where things weren't going his way, and that was the last of them.
So kind of like
And
in baseball, a batter who's in a slump, a great batter, but who's just
yeah,
not hitting for a couple months, right? It's very similar to that,
exactly.
right?
And you get in a slump. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
exactly the same thing.
how about from the tennis world? Because I know you're very passionate about this and you've had a lot of experience. How do you define performance anxiety in the tennis world, and what have you
Very
observed?
similar situation. In the tennis world, um, it's a very similar situation because you have to imagine a tennis player is a solo performer in general. Well, let's not talk about people who play doubles, but a singles player is a singles performer. Might as well be a soloist at the Met, or if you're going to play a big match anywhere, or play a small match. I played a small tournament just recently and had a bit of anxiety for that tournament. We'll get to that. But anxiety for tennis players is very similar because you're trying to do something that's very precise, as in any performance, or just like you said in your intro, if you're going to do a presentation at a wedding, and you're going to give the toast at a wedding, you want it to go just right. You don't want to say the wrong thing and to prepare,
Right.
and you can get nervous about that. Tennis players as well will play a first match of a tournament and they want to win it, and they can have doubts about how things go because yesterday during their practice, the forehand wasn't firing properly. And that's the shot they rely on the most. And so they go out there for no reason, even though they've been going for weeks with a perfect forehand. But just because they had that little problem the day before, they doubt themselves. And when you're in your mind about how do I hit this forehand instead of just hitting it, because your body remembers, you get in your own way. Then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then you start to hit very badly. And then the next match you have, you're in your head again, and that continues. And it becomes anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. I just did this tournament where the first 3 matches I played, lost my first singles match, lost my second singles match, uh, lost my first mixed doubles match, and then finally my last mixed doubles match, I was like, you know what? I'm in my head. Let's just hit. End up winning it, right?
Nice.
So
Okay.
you have to find a way out of the funk. And tennis players in general talk about scar tissue and stuff like that.
Interestingly enough, years ago, I was on the balcony of a hotel room that I was in Florida, and on the balcony next to me was this retired famous professional football player. I'm not going to say his name or what team he was for. And we're shooting the bull, and we're having a nice chat. From my balcony to his, it was very close, and we're just having a nice chat. And at one point, I said to him, because he had won a Super Bowl, and I said to him, what? Can you explain to me what happens when you have this great team all season long who then goes to the Super Bowl and just collapses? Like it's just one of those blowouts. What in your mind? And I bring this up because his answer was so funny. He said to me, "There's something about going to the show that makes the ass get tight." never forget him saying that. But I think that's a good metaphor, actually, for the fact
That
that
is a perfect way.
they're in their head, you know.
Absolutely.
For singers, I mean, if let's talk about the tension that comes from anxiety real briefly. I mean, the voice has to be relaxed to work well. For tennis players, the tension, I'm sure, tightens the muscles in the arms and the legs and slows you down.
Exactly.
If that's happening to you as a singer, let's start there. What can you do to make sure that those muscles that you need from your diaphragm and whatever else work, your larynx, whatever the mechanics are, don't get too tight to fail?
Exactly. Now, there are two parts to this. There's a preventative side. If I know that I'm dealing with a singer who's had some issues, who's had some bad performances and has a bit of PTSD, we'll do a little bit of, I guess you might refer to it as self-hypnosis. So what we do is, I'll go through it very quickly. I'd say, close your eyes. Imagine you go into an elevator. We go down 10 stories. Then you get down there, the elevator door opens, and that's the stage where we're going to perform. So now we're going to program what is going to happen. You're going to walk out. This is what you're going to do. So we program the successful performance. Then this performance is over. We go back into the elevator. We go back up. It's basically programming the subconscious
Through visualization.
And so doing there.
Right.
Exactly, visualization, right? And then the singer has this programming, and I've experienced this. It was a teacher of mine that showed me this when I was having a terrible cold and thought that my performance would go badly. We programmed it. I went out, and the performance went pretty much the way we programmed it. That was radical. So I never forgot that. So when I'm working with a singer who has some anxiety, maybe they have a cold, maybe they feel a bit insecure, we'll go through that exercise, and then normally things tend to go pretty well, unless there's something more extreme, that we can't deal with.
Okay, well, hold that thought, and I want to get to tennis in a second, but we're running long, so I just want to take a quick break to get my ad in, and then we will pick up where we left off with talking about tension with tennis players. Is that all right? So hang tight just for a minute.
Feeling overwhelmed? Struggling to find balance in your daily life? At Matt Brooks Coaching, we get it, and we can help. With over 25 years of nonprofit executive experience and an MSW with a clinical focus, Matt Brooks offers personalized coaching designed to help you rise above your challenges and live your best life. Whether you aim to advance your career, enhance your skills, or simply find more clarity and peace, Matt is here to be your partner and ally. Visit mattbrookscoaching.com to book your free discovery session today. Take the first step towards a brighter tomorrow.
Okay, back with Ron. Sorry for that interruption, but I've got to get that in. So let's pick this up where we left off. We were talking about how the stress can affect the mechanics of singing. Let's talk about how stress affects the mechanics of playing tennis. I mean, I imagine the muscles. I'm not a tennis player.
I'm going to connect the two.
Okay, connect the two.
I'm going to connect the two.
Go for it.
Because I told you there was one part that was preventative. That was this exercise that we do to program the performance. The other thing is what do you do in the moment when suddenly things are going haywire? What do you do? There, the same thing we do in singing as in tennis. You go back to basics, right?
Okay.
So if your forehand is a problem, visualize what the movement is, right? At what point do you hit the ball? How do you prepare? How do you step into it? How do you follow through? You know exactly what that move is. Without any emotion, just go through it. If you watch a tennis match and you watch a tennis player just miss the forehand, you'll watch them make a movement with their hand of how they were supposed to do it. It's a reminder.
Really?
So that's a reset.
I've never noticed that. I'll look for that.
Yeah, it happens a lot. They'd miss a shot, and then you see them go through the motion softly, just to remind themselves what they should have done as opposed to what they did.
Okay.
Right? So tennis, like singing, is lightning fast. It uses the entire body. And very often, we focus, for example, singers focus on the vocal cords, and tennis players focus on their arms a whole lot and how they hit the forehand, the backhand, their serves. But the problem is all of that is based on their legs. And very often, tennis players don't think about their legs. And very often, just getting them to, there's another exercise that tennis players do a lot when things are not going extremely well. They'll jump up and down, and all that does is it mentally connects them to their body.
Okay.
Because very often when things start to go wrong, you start to think, what am I doing wrong? Bad thought, right? Because the movement, if you've been playing tennis for any period of time, the movement is already memorized.
Okay.
Just like singing. It should be memorized. If it's not memorized, that could be a source of the problem whereby you have anxiety.
Yeah.
But if you have already a good technique and things are going wrong, most likely you need to get out of the way. So what you need to think is simple stuff. Keep your eyes on the ball the entire time. If you watch a slow motion of somebody hitting a great forehand, you'll watch them hit the ball, their arm finishes, but their eyes are still where the ball was. That's a very important part because they need to keep their eyes on the ball until the hit is done.
Well, two
Very
things
often
out of what
players-
you just said that relate to the show I did last week. One is grounding. You're essentially saying feel where you are. And
That's
grounding is a exercise where you feel your feet touching the floor and you're focusing on that.
Absolutely.
The other is being absolutely present in the moment, which means
Yes.
looking for something to see, feel, touch, hear. What do things sound like? As to get out of your head, to get out of the way, be present in the moment. Not easy to do, by the way. Sounds easy, but they're not easy to do.
No, it's not easy to do, and that's the thing. You need to. When I was doing martial arts a lot, I did kung fu and tai chi, and what was so great about tai chi, which I do daily even now, is that nothing is more important than the breath. The movement is based on your breathing, not the other way around, right? So
Interesting.
things like that, and singing is about breathing, and tennis it's about breathing. The greatest player who's ever played the game, Novak Djokovic, they asked him, "How do you deal with the stressful moments?" He said, "Well, there are lots of things. You have to be in the moment, just like you said." And he said, most importantly, conscious breathing.
Yeah.
And you'll watch him playing very difficult moments, and you'll watch him breathe. Many players don't breathe.
Yeah. Well,
And
I
that is enough.
talked about breathing exercises for right before the moment, like box
Yeah.
breathing, which is something the Navy SEALs do. But you're right. In the moment, we still need to breathe. That's what we need to focus
Yeah, we
there
do.
too.
We
Really
do.
great
Yeah.
advice. Yeah. All right. So, just really quick, do you find in your experience with opera singers, performance anxiety is more pronounced in beginners or in experienced people?
To tell the truth, both for different reasons. Beginners often don't have a solid technique, but sometimes they have to get in front of their colleagues, to sing or do a little recital in front of their parents and neighbors and so on. They get really nervous because they want to do a good job. Same principle. But their problems often occur when they haven't mastered their technique yet. And so often they get in their heads. They think, like, I'm going to sing this song. I dream of Jeannie with a light brown hair. Instead, they're thinking, like, I need to lift my soft palate. I need to breathe that way. And then everything becomes an exercise in tension, and things don't go well at that point.
And
right?
it's like quicksand, right? I remember that from the movie
Exactly.
The Replacements.
Then
They
you're-
talk about quicksand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Then you're lost there at that point.
Yeah.
Same thing happens with professionals for different reasons. Professionals often have the physical technique, otherwise they would not be at the highest level of the game. But they often get anxiety about things that are not clear to them. Tennis players, for example, I remember I went to a coach and he said, there are no secrets in tennis. Every coach will tell you the same thing, right? Because we see what you're doing and we can all comment about what you need to do better. There's agreement there. There used to be a time when voice teachers somewhat agreed on stuff, but there's not much agreement in singing anymore. So there's a real problem because you don't see the instrument.
Yeah.
Most everything is happening inside. So you have to have a real knowledge of anatomy and acoustics and how these things work. But for the singer, they have to go by feel. And you have to be very clear about what the sensations are.
Okay.
However, but when it's time to perform, if the physical aspect of it is not already memorized, you start to think, okay, I need to sing in the mask or I need to do this. It's too late at this point. And if that's not happening correctly, that's a problem. Another aspect of singing, for example, is memorizing words. Some people have it very easy, other people have a very hard time with it. Some singers get panicky because they think they're going to forget their lines.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so even though they sing really well, they're afraid that their memory is going to fail them. Others have a problem with not being sure if their melody and the harmony of the accompaniment, whether it's an orchestra or a piano, if they're clear about that or not. So they're afraid they might get off. They might get off key because because they're not sure about the harmony. Sometimes they don't know that that's a problem. They don't even know.
Okay.
They get into a performance and they go off and they don't know why that is. And so there are so many aspects of this that are conscious and very often not conscious.
Well,
and that's the worst.
Let's shift this to tennis playing, because you and I were talking and you used a term that apparently tennis players use that I never knew about. Tell us what scar tissue means in tennis. The term scar tissue.
Scar tissue is a memory of a bad experience, right? Let's say that, funny enough, I just watched one of the most incredible tennis matches of the year so far, or maybe of the last 5 years I've seen. A major tennis player, number 5 in the world, Daniel Medvedev, was playing against a young American who was only playing his second match in a Grand Slam. This thing went to 5 sets, almost 5 hours long.
Wow.
Both guys are just tired. They put everything out there. Both of them played magnificently. But this young man has a special mentality. During the entire match, you look at his face, there was never concern. He was just in the moment doing his thing. That's what's special about him, and everybody's commenting on this. Daniel Medvedev, who has won a Grand Slam, who has won a bunch of tournaments, one of the best players in the world, has lost a few in long 5 sets in the past 2 or 3 years. So what happened today? They get in a final set tiebreaker, 10-point tiebreaker. Medvedev is ahead. Kid catches up. Next thing you know, the kid won.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm about to have this discussion with Matt. The match just ended just right now from Australia.
Huh.
Medvedev is having a major issue with scar tissue right now, of memories of matches that were so close, especially long, grueling matches when it's just giving everything you've got and the other person gets ahead of him. And even the announcers were saying, like, we were pretty sure Daniel had this match in hand, but he lost it. And I'm very sure that it's scar tissue.
You know, there's that book, The Inner Game of Tennis, and I've read it, which talks a lot about these things. And I know, because I have several people in my life who are in the performing arts. I know that there was a book written based on that for musicians. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, I was talking to a few other people, and I bet you'll agree, sports people the ones that are really successful, seem to train psychologically from an early age, not just the physical stuff, but they train psychologically to create that steel mind, that the ability to do that. Musicians don't, it seems. And so, I have a friend in the performing arts who said to me, the truth about classical music is it's an entire industry fueled by insecurity. That's what he said. And
that's an incredible comment. And I would tend to agree with the way things are right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I imagine it's just so much harder for professional musicians, and I don't know what they do in the acting world, but I imagine it's the same. They're not training that on psychological approaches as much as they're training on the skills. So the performance anxiety, I'm sure, is rampant for them. So, all right. Well, this is a great place for us to stop today's show, because I don't want to run too long. I promise my listeners I keep it to 30 minutes. Sometimes I go to 40. We're at 35. That's fine. But the good news is we're going to continue this conversation next week with Ron. So hang tight. Be with us next week. We're going to finish next week. Ron, thank you for today, and thank you for coming next week.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. If you've enjoyed today's show, thanks for listening, by the way. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like or subscribe this podcast so you can be notified the next time I drop a show, and in particular for next week when the next show with Ron comes out. If you have any ideas for topics you would like me to cover, please feel free to email me. It's matt@mattbrookscoaching.com. I'd love to hear from you and see what ideas you have, and if I can make it happen, I will. So that's all for today. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you listening. Thanks again to Ron Lafond, who'll be back next week. Be well, and I'll catch you next time on the Barrier Busting Podcast.